Is the speaker on?
Yeah, not in the room.
Okay.
Online.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I just didn't want to shout and be shouting into the speaker.
Yeah.
Hi, folks. So I'm Mark Gagnon. I'm from the 2024 URI Master Gardener Intern Program. I am not Alan Newton, but Alan put this together. I actually hadn't really had a chance to dig through it and make any tweaks and stuff like that, but I might actually look at changing a few things going forward in the presentation itself. So I see had a pretty good turnout here. And we'll hop right into it. So today's seed starting. This is primarily going to apply to indoor vegetable seed gardening for the most part. I don't think we really want to go into too much on flowers and things of that nature outside of like food crops. So I'm with the URI Master Gardener, the Cooperative Extension. So we bring science-based information to Rhode Island resources. Our goal is to essentially inform the public of agriculture, gardening, all sorts of practices along with that type of thing. So land stewardship, food systems, water resources, energy conservation, and healthy lifestyles. Our main area of focus for the most part, of course, is gardening. So just our principles, we're committed to improving quality of life, livelihoods, health, natural environment through our work. We believe in social and environmental justice, and we strive to deepen our cultural understanding and proficiency while building capacity to create inclusive experience that address diverse stakeholder needs. It's quite a mouthful, but we're here to help everyone. That's the gist. So one thing we like to do is extend anybody who's interested in the program as well. Join up. You know, you want to get doing some volunteer work and, you know, bump shoulders with other people in your community that actively garden and like working on such projects, reach out. All right. This is a link to our hotline and free soil pH testing. So they do drop off at the Malin Outreach Center down in Kingston. There's also, during the course of the year, different kiosks that you'll see at different places. So I think we do one at Roger Williams quite a bit, and a handful of other places. I know we've done like the Warwick Library, and I don't know if they do one here or not, but it could be. Their schedule changes, so it shifts, but they'll do pH testing. That's about all they do as far as soil testing is concerned, but that's kind of the most important piece is getting your pH right. But they can also give you information on other sources too if you need to test for, say, like lead or something like that. So you can find this right off the URI Cooperative Extension. We do have the little QR code thing you can scan too, and that should bring you right to the page. And there's a lot of resources off those pages. Oh, I already talked about becoming a URI Master Gardener, but here it is again. It does run for 14 weeks, January through April. A lot of folks feel intimidated at first. Believe me, it's not that intimidating. I shouldn't really say that though, because I kind of know all this. I'm a biologist anyway, so I sort of know all that information. But it's geared so that people succeed. We want people to succeed because we want volunteers and we want people educating the public and we want people to make these relationships with the public and with their communities. So it's definitely a cool program. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. I've met some really neat people doing some really cool things. It's nice. Plus I get to come places like this and give presentations. So, so starting seeds indoors. It's that time of year where we're all kind of tired of the cold weather and freezing out there and the ice and the snow. But we're very, very close to the start of seed starting and getting our gardens ready. So hence why we're doing this now. So I think within the next few weeks, the URI schedule for starting seeds actually kicks off. However, Some folks have already started doing some things. I've started some things just because I like growing stuff. But this is mainly geared towards food. It's kind of weird that they threw the slide mixed in here and not before, but just a little shout out for land acknowledgement. So one thing we also do as Master Gardeners is we work very closely with Narragansett Indian tribe, and we just want to make note that we are gathering on their ancestral homelands, and they welcome the English to share the island. No concepts of buying or selling land that belong to the Creator. Give thanks for their stewardship of the land, which they found to be rich in resources, and the land and sea, which we honor their descendants. May our program today create us in the same reverence for this place and help us to be better stewards. So it's just something we like to make note of, something to keep in the back of your head. Okay, why start seeds? Well, one thing, if you've ever done a garden before, you have a choice between buying pre-grown plugs or small plants to plant out, or you can start with seeds. Seeds happen to be a lot less expensive. You also have the opportunity to get a lot more variety, so you don't have to go down to the local shop and only plant what they have. And you have better growth control, so you can start them at a different time and have them mature at a different time. And one thing we talk about, I don't know if it's mentioned in here, is crop timing. So you can start your seeds at a certain time so you get adult plants. Like, for example, lettuce matures very quickly, so you can do lettuce over and over and over again. You can plant it at different times to do that. And if you buy plugs, you have them grown at the exact same size at that time, so you're kind of stuck with what you have. The other part is earlier harvest. So some years we have warmer springs than others. Last year, we didn't have a winter, in my opinion. I kind of like winter. I'm a weirdo. But we could have actually planted out a couple of weeks earlier. And in fact, I think I did with some of my stuff in my garden. So you can start earlier with certain things. There are some cold tolerant crops, a lot of your brassicas like cabbages and stuff like that. So there is potential to start a little bit earlier with seeds. Whereas if you're dependent on those plugs, they're dependent on when people are going to buy stuff, so they're only going to be selling that when people are buying stuff this spring. So you'll be waiting a while. So step one is planning your garden. I'm really bad at this step because I usually go at it and then figure stuff out afterwards, which is not the way to do things. And I'm sharing this with you because I just want everybody to know it's okay to fail. That's how we learn. We learn by failure. So I make this mistake all the time of just having my eyes like saucers, wanting to plant everything, and then figuring out I don't have spaces for everything. So there's really two main options. I think we should probably throw a third option in here, which is container gardening, but raised bed and in-ground. Raised bed has a lot of advantages over in-ground. For one, if you're older, there's a lot less stooping because it's a little bit up more, but it also allows you to control your soil type. So I don't know if any of you have been in the southern part of the state or anything and tried to till or make an in-ground garden in the southern part of the state. It's nothing but rocks. That's all it is. It's pure rocks as far as the eye can go. That's why if you drive around, there's stone walls everywhere. The farmers just took the rocks and stacked them to get them out of the way. So it's actually really difficult to do that in the southern part of the state, just to till and go with an in-ground bed. It's incredibly difficult. Plus, you have a lot of sand, you have a lot of peat, and it's very acidic soil. So you have to put a lot of lime to correct your soil. It makes a mess. Raised bed, boom, you just fill it in. You can control your soil day one. Similar, you could do that with containers. One thing that's a little bit different with containers versus raised bed is that the containers will dry out a lot faster than a raised bed. But raised bed can kind of cure all ills. So drainage problems, raised bed. Soil problems, raised bed. It's really the way to go, in my opinion. But in-ground is classic, tried and true. So, if you do an in-ground, do an in-ground. If it works for you, it works. My grandfather did in-ground all the time. And that worked for him. Well, I should say my grandparents, it worked for them. They both actively gardened. Soil mix for raised beds. Soil and compost mix recommended at a ratio of 70% to 30%. So 70% soil to 30% compost. We don't really want to plant things in pure compost. It's not really soil, so to say. What the whole point of compost is to add nutrients and organic matter. So we want to mix that in with soil. Soil has minerals, it has sand, it has other organic elements, it has a whole bunch of different things. So soil is not just dirt, it's a living thing, as well as being a geological thing, so to say. I hate to say it that way, but for lack of a better word. But you want to make sure the soil and compost are good quality and from reputable sources. Now, one trick you can actually do with raised beds as well to save on soil, you don't have to go full soil in a raised bed. You actually can kind of do what they call in Germany a Hugelkultur, which is hill culture. And what they would do is actually fill in wood and then fill dirt over the top. So you can kind of do the same thing. You can fill it in with old logs at the bottom, some sticks and some stuff, and then cover it with your soil. This way you're not wasting a lot of money getting good soil. Yeah, you can do leaves. Leaves are excellent. Leaves, you can do leaf mold. During the fall, I'm sure people think I'm weird and crazy because I actually go to my neighbor's house and steal their bagged leaves. Yeah, I'm that guy. I annoy my wife too because whenever I drive around the neighborhood, I'm like, I wonder if they want their leaves. And she starts getting mad at me. So, yeah, I actually have like a little leaf vac shredder, and I shred them up and I put them in a big bin, and next year, boom, amazing soil. So you can actually do that over the winter. Works really well. You don't want to plant like directly into such things though, like compost like that. That's really more of like a filler, or you can use it as a mulch over the top, shredded leaves. And depending on the leaves you get to, they can add some acidity. So you got to be cautious with that, always with your pH. Like around here, everything wants to be acid. So you have to understand, like, when you're planting in a general region, your soil type is always going to be trying to go back to that pH. So around here, everything's trying to be acid. So it's just something to be aware of. That doesn't mean you have to lime every year. We've had cases where people have like just limed and limed and limed, and they actually like made the pH really, really basic, which is not good either. Yeah, I think this is just a Photoshop here thing, just some limestone rates, fertilizer rates, etc. This is pretty much stuff you can find online. You can find it on our pages as well. All right, so here's my jam. Some basic biology of seeds and how they work. So basically what a seed is it's a baby plant. But unlike people, we bring our kids in, we have to keep them warm, and day one, taking care of them. Plants don't get that. They're sort of striking out on their own the minute they go out. And some plants need to survive a winter before they germinate and grow up. Some plants need to start before then because they won't survive the winter unless they germinate before. And then we have our food crops, which are mutants. So in case you don't know, just about every food we eat has been highly changed by man. So corn used to just be grass. If you look at ancestral corn, they cannot even find it because it no longer exists in the wild. It's been bred so crazily by man, it pretty much doesn't exist. So all of our food crops are like that, and they've been changed by man over time specifically for culture, for us to grow. So that's why a lot of seeds, we can just take them, put them in some soil and some water, and boom, up it comes. Because we've essentially trained the plant to be like that. We've selected artificially plants to act like that. Traditionally, a lot of seeds actually have ways to delay opening up. So some seeds have a hard seed coat that needs to be scarified first, which means may freeze and thaw or brush up against sand, or sometimes go through the gullet of a bird, which I don't know if any of you know, but the gizzard of a bird is basically like rasping sandpaper So it scratches that seed coat. So a lot of plants need that before they can actually germinate. Our food crops, though, luckily because we bred them, don't have that problem, with the exception of maybe a couple. Some, I think, need to be cold and then warm before you get them to go. Like I'm having some trouble with spinach, which I have a feeling needs a little bit of coolness before it can germinate. So seeds should have that kind of built in where it changes from the cool season to the hot season. And I can tell you I personally like to grow a lot of natives, and I like to grow weird native trees that nobody grows. And there's some that actually like take 2 years to germinate. Like, so you actually keep them on a cycle outside and monitor them. It's fun. But we have here the basics of how a seed works. So we have the seed itself, the hypocotyl, which is where the radical is going to emerge from, which is the beginning root of the plant. And then the seed coat will be shed. Sometimes this will be worn off beforehand, depending on how seeds are going through, whether you're cultivating them or whether they're wild seeds. And then you have the cotyledon. The cotyledon is basically what we call a seed leaf, and that stores all the energy and nutrients that a baby plant needs to survive its first initial growth until it gets true leaves, which are these leaves over here. Actually, you can't see my mouse on there, never mind. The leaves over here. So the cotyledon itself is packed full of tons of nutrients. That's why grains are good for you, because they're full of baby plant food, essentially. So you're eating all these proteins and all these sugars and all these other things that the plants put into their seeds specifically for growth. So once we grow and get our first leaves, the cotyledons kind of lose their necessity. Really not as needed anymore. Not that you should pick them off, they're always helpful. They'll drop off naturally. But once the first leaves start coming out, then the plant starts making its own food. You know, they're autotrophs for the most part. There's a couple that aren't, handful that aren't. So once you have those true leaves, the plant's basically doing its thing. Puts out its solar panels, makes its energy. Step 2, survey the seed catalogs. I actually would say lots of times, yeah, I guess that would be step 2. You want to plan your garden before you go crazy. I do the opposite. I get all the seed catalogs and go mental. Yeah, I love my seed catalogs. They're a lot of fun going through. And I end up with like a stack like that every year. They're usually free too, for the most part. You can go online, find some places that you like, or maybe some places that you heard of. See what they have to offer. Or if you're looking for a specific cultivar or something that maybe your neighbor was talking about, is a different type, check it out. Check it out online, see what you can find. Maybe you find a place that has some really interesting varieties and you want to order from them. And lots of times if you look online, they'll give you a free catalog. They'll be like, whew. Johnny's is tried and true, in my opinion, in this area. They're from Maine. I don't like to specify any particular. They actually have one on here in the next slide. Actually, no, might as well. Yeah, here's some seed packages from Pine Tree, which I've ordered from before. They're not bad. Territorial I've ordered from, MI Gardener, Epic Gardening, which I think they bought botanical interests, which you should see in a lot of the shops now. Almost anywhere you go to like a garden shop, they'll have the botanical interests. Those aren't bad. Burpee, it's really hard to find bad seeds, but I will say the standard tried and true like burpees and stuff like that you find in the store, they're usually less diverse in heritage varieties, I guess you'd say. So you're gonna have a harder time like finding something like I bought like a Kellogg's German tomato this for this spring. You'd probably never find that in standard burpees or something like that. So there's definitely a lot of cool specialties out there, and there's some places that just specialize in like pepper seeds or specialize in just like weird stuff, like outlandish things. But honestly, whenever I find a new one, I just order a catalog and see if I like what they have. And then I kind of get an idea of, do I like the amount of seed they give me? Some don't give me that much. I think Territorial, I'm not too impressed by the amount of seed they give in their packets, but I've ordered from like MI Garden and they give a lot more. So some are more expensive, some are cheaper, so it could totally depend on budget too. It's easy to jack up prices ordering seeds. One thing about any good seed package though is it's going to have a lot of good information on here. So it's going to tell you when to start, how deep you should plant, which a lot of seeds actually don't need a lot of depth. That's a common misconception. If you think about it, when seeds get dispersed, the bird or whatever is not going around burying them in the ground per se. You know, it's just putting the fertilizer out and there you go. So seeds in that way, they don't necessarily need to be planted very deep. It helps for some seeds to help shed the seed coat and keep them from drying out, so like larger seeds, for example. But we really shouldn't be planting any deeper than the seed's width. But it gives you an idea of timing, you know, like when you're going to want to plant out, how long you're going to want that growing in pots before you plant out, the temperature it needs for germination. It also has information, I think, on direct sowing as well. In this particular case, plant spacing, which some will tell you, some will not. I think most will tell you, but some of them also have other information that they put on there as well. I should have brought a few packets with me, but didn't even think of it. So some will actually give you some ideas too. I think with botanical interest, one of the things, the guy runs a YouTube called Epic Gardening, which is a fun thing to watch, I like. But he was talking about his seed catalog, and one thing he did on that is he actually tries to describe the flavors and explain and give you an idea of how you can use things. So some places will do stuff like that. Actually, I think MI Gardener does a YouTube too. Oh, well, here it is. I'm reading ahead of things. So yeah, it tells you when to plant, where to plant, how deep to plant, and any special needs. Like I said, some seeds can be tricky, so read carefully. Even before you order it, if you're just new at it, maybe don't go with the crazy stuff to start with. I could be honest with you, I've had good luck with crazy stuff and then bad luck with easy stuff, so just don't feel bad if you mess things up. That's the nice thing about seeds too, is it's cheap. You know, if you mess it up, you could try again. Water. So water's a big one. Adequate continuous supply. Once germination begins, a dry period could kill the seedling. So the minute a seedling starts germinating, that's going to be the most dangerous part of its life, essentially, until you harvest it, of course. But it is a very, very tricky time, and especially doing it indoors is particularly difficult because we don't have all of the things that are outside that actually protect a seedling, like wind, sun, direct sunlight. So when we're inside, we're dealing with artificial light, and sometimes excess moisture and no wind, and that can actually create a lot of mold problems. So it's important to provide continual moisture, but not too moist and they'll rot, which is true. Plastic covering helps with moisture retention, and watering early morning is best. One thing I'd like to throw on here, which I don't think was mentioned, is there's options of how you water. Specifically, I brought a couple flats with me today, just some stuff from my house. Sorry if it's a little dirty, but I don't like overhead watering. And one of the reasons is it keeps that top layer of soil way too moist. But I have here a humidity dome. I actually have some holes drilled into it, mainly because I've been using these outside for my winter sowing. But it's actually not a terrible idea for indoors too, because it adds a little bit of ventilation. But take your 10-20 flat humidity dome, that's really the easiest way to keep humidity in on things. Problem is, like I said, you don't want to do it too long because it stays too moist, things will die. I actually almost never use humidity domes inside, with the exception of a couple different things. Like I just started some, what are they? Husk tomatoes. I don't know if anybody knows what those are, but they're delicious. Some of the supermarkets you can find them in. They're amazing. They taste like pineapple. But I started a few inside, and I actually had to do that just to keep the moisture and to get them started. I was trying to do it for a while without it. Nothing was happening. put that on, boom, there you go. But, pretty straightforward setup. But one thing I like to do is keep them in this, and I usually have a tray underneath. I kind of layer things. It's a little bit more expensive, but it works for me. So I usually have like a rigid tray or like a basket tray. And if I have like a less rigid cell, I actually put that in and do that so I can lift it up and water underneath in the tray. This way I'm not getting the seedlings at the top wet, which can cause them to rot. I'm just watering from the bottom, letting the soil wick up the moisture.
Do you find that you can grow different types of seeds in like a flat like that? Or
I do. I don't know if that's recommended, but I actually have a lot of weird stuff right now, and I have a couple of these wind strips, which these are unfortunately rather expensive, but they're tough. You can like stand on one, it's not going to break, which I like. And I'll wash them out and use them next year again to start my seedlings. The other thing I like about these two, I can put my fingers and pop them out. And they have these little cuts in them that can help with root development. They air prune, so it actually keeps the roots growing nice. But they're pretty pricey, unfortunately. And I bought, one or two last year and one this year, and that's that. I'm done. I don't plan on ever buying any more. But I do that. I have other couple methods I use too. I have like the soil blockers down here too, which actually, we'll explain that in a second. What we'll do first too is one thing you also need is oxygen. This is just a little explanation of an experiment that was performed showing that they need oxygen. So seeds need both. A lot of people don't understand is plants do photosynthesis, but they also do respiration. So just like us, they need oxygen to actually use their energy. So they actually do a lot of their respiration. Well, they do it all the time, but more often during the night as well. And they actually end up letting out a lot of CO2 at that point. Too much water deprives a seedling of oxygen. So again, your beans, your peas and stuff like that, they're not water plants. So don't water them like they're water plants. That's one reason too I like the bottom watering. I can really gauge the levels, and I just make sure it touches the bottom just enough for it to wick up. And once I see it get dry, I'll do it again and repeat the process. So it's just an easy way, because I'm just really bad at keeping track of things. I'll be like, see ya, and that's not good. That's not good for plants. So I have a tendency to forget things, so I have to do things that ensure I don't forget. Warmth is a big piece. These bad boys, these seedling mats, are fantastic. You really only want them on while you're germinating your seeds. Once they're done germinating, you want that off, or you'll be cooking your seeds. I've noticed tomatoes and like the solanaceous stuff like the heat a lot more, so sometimes I leave those on a little bit longer for them. So like eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, they tend to like those warmer temperatures from the tropics, so it makes more sense. Things like brassicas and stuff like that, you do that, they're just going to get huge really, really quickly. Or either that, you'll bake them and dry them out. So just be careful of your temperature, and that's kind of where I was talking about too with mixing these. So I actually have a mix of some brassicas and a couple like tomatoes. I'm just starting them. I'm like, probably not a good idea to have them both in the same tray because they're going to need slightly different conditions. So yeah, you can go with it. There's other options too. I just brought a couple things with me. Like you can get like 6-cell inserts and use those in your trays. You don't have to use these either. Like whatever works. You do you. If you have a system that works, stick with the system because you got something going on. But these also let you have a little bit more control over how many plants you're going to get, and you can actually mix and match. So it gives you some options. I have a problem with growing too much and then not knowing where to put things. So light is big. definitely, light is probably the trickiest part, in my opinion, just because I live in a small house. A lot of my house does face southwest, which is great, but the windows are tiny. So they're not really big windows, so I don't get a lot of light coming through those windows. So one thing we have the opportunity of now, and it's become a little bit more affordable, I'll say, still isn't really affordable, is LED lights, grow lights. They're a lot better than the old grow lights. And unfortunately, if you were to look online right now, they'd probably tell you like the grow lights don't do enough and yada yada, but the LED ones that are out on the market now are just gotten better and better and better. They're not terrible. They don't replace the sun. I mean, the sun it's the sun. So, I mean, you're not really going to replace that. So that is a bit tricky. But I use a setup with a bunch of LED lights on a metal tier rack. And you want the light to be as close to your seedlings as possible. A lot of the ones you'll buy for if you want to buy grow lights, they'll have like adjustable things on them. They'll be set up that way so you can adjust them. And the idea is you have to raise them as the seedlings grow. Sometimes they get hot, and if they're too close, you might end up baking your seedlings too, I've noticed. So there's a few of them that do get pretty warm. So just something to keep in mind. But as close as possible is best case. You know what, before we do this, because this is just going into germination, I just want to talk about the soil blocks real quick. This was one piece that is not in the original presentation, but it's worth talking about. So these are soil blockers. And the cool thing about these is instead of using flats and stuff like this, you can basically make pots just out of soil. These have come down in price significantly. This one, I forgot how much this was, but one thing I do with the soil blocks is you can just use like a flat, a 1020 flat with holes in it, put it in your humidity tray, and you can boom, 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 put your blocks out. These are really cool. It is a little tricky to learn at first because you have to use a slightly different soil mixture. You need something that's a little stickier, so to say. So I've actually taken some basic seed starting mix and mix in a little bit of clay, just a tiny bit of earth clay just to get it to stick right. And you basically jam this thing in, you compact it a bit, boom, and you make your little things. And as you'll notice, the inserts I have on the big one match up the inserts on the little one. So what's cool about this is once these guys start getting their root development, I can take them, divide them, and put them into bigger blocks. So one thing you'll have to do with seedlings is once they get too big for wherever you started them, you'll have to put them into a bigger pot before you plant them out. Unless you time it perfectly, in which case you could plant it straight out. These, I think, are hugely efficient, and they're worth the initial investment if you don't have a lot of money for things, because you never have to buy pots again. You just need a couple flats and boom, you're done. All you have to do is get your soil. But I think they sell these pretty cheap now. This one, I don't know, maybe 20 bucks. This one, I can't remember. This one might have been 30 because it was a name brand. I couldn't find another one that was small. But they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool little pieces. And it's, again, bottom watering technique, and you just kind of use the vented trays and you do that. And these trays too, one nice thing with all the marijuana cultivation going on is we have a lot of nice grow shops now, so you can find a lot of cool materials. So I actually bought these, might have been at like Good to Grow or something like that. You can find humidity domes, 1020 flats, all that stuff. These ones are a little trickier. You have to go hunting for them. I think the guy who did Epic Gardening made his own seed trays for this. This was another company entirely. I forgot what it is, Bootstrap Gardener, I think. But they're neat. I end up doing a lot of research on what like professional farmers use, and I'm like, I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to buy a couple of those and just deal with it. And some of these things, again, are worth it, and it all depends on what your style is, what you prefer, what you like. don't feel like you want to break the bank to do stuff, you can definitely get by doing things on the cheap. Some people use like toilet paper roll things, and that works for them. Awesome. So pre-germination hastens the process. Other germination conditions here. Scarification, creating a break in the seed coat, stratification, artificial chilling, vernalization, the cooling of seeds or bulbs to accelerate flowering. All right, so these kind of go back to what I was talking about with how seeds work. Most of the seeds we're going to plant for gardens, they're not going to require a lot of germination conditions. This tends to come into play more with doing like perennial flowers, for example. Like, I don't know if anybody's grown echinacea, but echinacea is native to North America. Echinacea actually has to go through a cold period before it germinates. So you'll get about maybe 40 to 50% germination just from planting a thing of echinacea seeds. And you won't get the rest of them because they need to go through that cold period. Now, if you put them through that cold, moist period and then brought them out after, 3 months or so, you'd probably get like 90 to 95% germination. So with wildflowers, annuals you don't have to worry about as much, but definitely perennials. Scarification's big. One thing I like to do if I'm planting flowers, I research where they came from and then kind of figure out from there. Like, you're doing zinnias, those come from Mexico. So they probably don't need that cold period as much. Dahlias, well, dahlias are probably buying tubers anyways, but same idea. So some will need it, some will not. So stratification here is talking about moist seeds in warm 50 to 60, followed by 30 degrees to 40. See, this is, yeah, so he says here spinach, radish. Radish I don't really have that problem with. I usually do a soak and direct seed with radish personally. Asparagus, I personally don't grow asparagus seed because I like to get male crowns because they produce better asparagus. So I actually think you're better off buying roots of asparagus just because you won't get the female, which have little narrower asparagus, what do you call them? Shoots. Cilantro. If somebody has figured out cilantro, please tell me. I have not. I've actually been at a few kiosks where people have asked me about cilantro. I'm like, you're asking the wrong person about cilantro. Had nothing but problems with it. But yeah, again, many perennial flowers. So vernalization, the cooling of seeds and bulbs. I'm not sure what they're actually getting at with this particular piece. Accelerate flowering, because you don't really want flowering with chard. And Brussels sprouts, I don't think it's really the flowers that actually create the heads, quite frankly. I think it's a different part anatomically speaking. I didn't do any of this with my Brussels sprout seeds, and I have big old Brussels sprouts right now in some pots pretty much ready to go. So yeah, they're cold tolerant, so you can actually plant them a bit earlier. Same with chard. Carrots, I almost feel like carrots you're better off doing like a winter sow. I've seen some things with that where you can actually sow them late and overwinter them, but I don't know. Carrots, I don't think you really, I can't say I've ever seen that as a problem with carrots because I've usually planted them and they've come right up. I mostly direct sow those personally. Daffodils and tulips, I don't even know if you can, I don't even know if they have seeds for those because they're so mutantly bred that I would think they'll all be sterile, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Kale, I haven't had that problem with kale. I'm growing kale right now. Same with beets. Not that I like beets. It's the one vegetable I don't like. It just tastes like dirt to me. I don't know. I can't figure that out. All right, step 4, getting started. So when to plant indoors. Unfortunately, it's kind of tiny right here, but on our site, hey, how's it going? You gonna plant some seeds? Yeah. We have this on our site. It's a schedule, and you can actually get that off of the University URI Master Gardener extension. This is like the bee's knees of planting things in the state because it's geared toward Rhode Island specifically. Again, you can have some nuances to play with that too. Like there are some things you could probably plant out a little sooner. You can start it a little sooner. It's really how your operation works or how your garden works for you. So if you have a schedule that doesn't match up with this and it works for you, keep on doing what you're doing. If you don't, this is a great place to start. And it is downloadable. I actually have it saved off as like a book on my phone so I can look at it whenever I want.
Is that just scheduled for outdoor planting, or does it?
No, yeah, I wish this were a bigger picture because it actually, these little, if you're in the back, you probably can't see this at all, but there's little letters in here, and some of them say like, I think D, I, and like S, and then one's for like start indoors, direct sow, and I forgot what the I is for or whatever, but it explains it on there. There's a key, and it'll tell you. It gives you the timing, I think, to start it indoors and when to plant out. So it gives you that full schedule. It also tells you too when you can like direct sow outside. But yeah, it's a really, everybody loves this, and it's funny because in the kiosk everybody comes looking for it, and they're like, "Oh, you have the schedule, you have the paper," and they stop printing them. So now we have to tell people it's only online. I kind of feel bad because I like having it in hand personally. But hey, what are you gonna do? Cutting back on paper, I guess. All right. So days, yeah, this has days of germination and maturity, annual or perennial, and helps you create your planting calendar. Like I said, I'm ahead of the game because I just wanted stuff to grow. So I'm like, all right, what cool season things can I do now? Maybe hope I can get them in the ground quick enough. So I'm starting early. I think not next week. It's probably the week after. I think you can start some things. Peppers, honestly, like they always give peppers the same schedule as tomatoes, but peppers take so much longer to get large. You could probably start them like a week or two sooner. Containers. So see, now we're on containers. I'm a little bit off. So here's some great examples of just some on-the-cheap containers, like toilet paper rolls. I don't know about the whole egg thing. I'm not sold on that. That seems like way too much work for me. The egg carton, maybe. That's pretty cool. Just use the cardboard from that. This person obviously has an affinity for cardboard. There's a lot of cardboard in there. There's some things I like and don't like about cardboard, like the tubes like this. One cool thing is you could probably just pull the bottom off and put it right in. But personally, if it's in a peat pot like that, you're going to want to have to cut the pot up and break it up so that the roots can come out. It's a common misconception that the thing's going to disintegrate. It's probably not going to disintegrate quick enough for the roots to get out, so you're going to want to break those up a little bit when you plant them out. But this other person used yogurt containers, which, hey, if it works, it works. But you want to make sure stuff is clean. So if you're using something recycled or even repurposing trays from last season, you probably should wash these out. Because every little last germ or everything that gets into your mix is going to desterilize it and also potentially hurt your seedlings. And I am bad about doing that, and I kill seedlings all the time.
Do you have any opinion on the coconut core pots?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's greener than peat, but I don't know how much because the coconut plots they take, you're pretty much cutting down forests to put in coconut plots and do that too. So at the same time, it's like, but it works just as fine. As far as the pot's concerned, yeah, you're going to want to break them up. Anything that you put in there, they'll always say you could just throw it in the ground. No, that's not completely true. Personally, like if I had something like this or this, I have like it's a Japanese hori-hori, it's a garden knife, and it's got like a nice serrated edge on it. Just go right down the sides, cut it open, break it open, plant it, then you're good. As long as those roots can get out, you're okay. But the thing is with this stuff is it has to last long enough in water and being watered to stay together. So at some point, like the plant's going to have to break free of that. So it's kind of counterproductive at a point. Growing media. So here's the fun stuff. Loose and aerated, moist but not too wet. You want it to hold some moisture but not stay really moist. Hence why they have the perlite and vermiculite in here. Looks like dirt, but is mostly soilless. So, excuse me. The mix he noted here is vermiculite, perlite, and sphagnum peat, or coconut coir, whatever you go with. So it really doesn't matter. Some places recommend that you sift it. Some places don't really care. You're probably, the one tricky part about growing media too is that depending on how long you're planning on keeping your seedlings in. So for example, these small blocks, I probably would make a mix without fertilizer in this. And I usually mix in organic fertilizer so it won't burn the plants. But if you're using something a little bit bigger like this, maybe mix in a little organic fertilizer. That makes things a bit tricky too because you're still trying to keep it sterile but also have nutrients. Because once those plants produce their true leaves, they're going to need nutrients. So once they've used up those cotyledons, all right, they're all on their own now. So they have to have some sort of nutrients in the soil at that point. One nice thing is some places do that pre-packed. I hate to talk about Miracle-Gro, but Miracle-Gro makes seedling mix with the right amount of fertilizer. It's kind of like easy peasy, way to go. So those are options as well when you're checking. If you're going, depending on how much you're going, you can actually buy a decently priced bag of planting mix.
So is growing media
Yeah, so growing media is not in its own right soil. It'll be sold as soil, so they'll call it like seedling potting mix or seedling soil or something like that. It's not true soil because it's all organic matter. So peat is just basically not broken down like twigs and leaves. So it's broken down enough to form peat, gets compressed, eventually makes coal, but it's not. It doesn't have the minerals, doesn't have the nutrients and those other things in there too. So for the most part, it's kind of sterile, and it just serves as like essentially like old roots that are just absorbing water naturally. So the way plants work, their vascular systems actually will suck up water like a straw without actually putting in effort. So that's kind of how that stuff works. The coconut coir and the peat will just wick it right up. So essentially that's what you're using for that. It's a good way to mix in like organic stuff and kind of keep moisture preserving layer, like if you were going to mix it into like actual soil. But it in itself is fairly inert. Same with vermiculite and perlite. Vermiculite, I forgot, it's like a pumice. I know perlite is like it's like a man-made pumice. But those are also inert. Really what they serve a purpose for is allowing water to drain freely and keeping soil loose. So it doesn't get compacted. Because straight peat moss or coconut coir, that stuff it's like a sponge, and it won't drain well. So watering, keep moist but not something. Not too wet, I think it meant to say. Cover seedlings until they emerge. Again, that can kind of go either way. Check your research. Be careful, again, on the internet, as we all should know. There's a lot of bad information as well. But find something that works for you. I actually just switched up how I'm germinating tomato seeds. And I'm kind of using a method my dad used to use, which I should have just listened to him to begin with. But I'm one of the hard-headed kids in the family, so so now that I'm using that plus a little bit different technique, and it's working out really well. But I've also kind of set things up too so that I can bump things up when I need to. So that's why I'm starting now, which is like maybe a week or two too early. For sure.
Curious, what did your dad do?
Oh, he actually takes them in a paper towel, puts the seeds in there, folds them up, moistens the towel, little Ziploc bag, and he threw them in the windowsill and just kind of checked them. Once they germinated, he'd like prick them out, and then put them in little pots. I'm doing something similar, except I have an empty 10 by 20 tray with a heat mat underneath, and I just threw them on top of that under the lights, and they're kicking off something fierce. So I'll have tomatoes ready. And I'm doing that with the peppers too, because I'm sort of playing around, because it's my first year really doing peppers. My dad used to do them a lot, but I never did them. I never bothered. And I'm like, you know what? I want some peppers. So I was trying something that just wasn't working. I was trying to put it like straight in, and the germination on those are so slow. And I did that, and I can already see some starting to germinate. I'm like, all right, that's the way to go. So I think I'll do that with all the solanaceous things. So damping off chamomile tea. Somebody mentioned this. I've never tried it. I Googled it. They said it can help at times. I have no idea. I don't know if there's really any research on it, but oh, sorry. You know, that's a good point. Thank you. I have a tendency to like talk about things and not fully understand my audience. So I'm talking about like solanaceous things too. Like solanaceous things are like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants are in the Solanaceae family. So they're in the nightshade family. So that's why you can't eat the leaves of potatoes. They're also solanaceous, and a lot of solanaceous plants are deadly poisonous. Oddly enough, the fruits are not for many of them. Some of them, yes. But damping off is actually it's the bad guy of bad guys when it comes to seed starting. It's the worst of the worst. It's what's going to destroy an entire flat almost instantaneously. And it's a fungal disease, and it's more often than not spread by fungal gnats, which if you have one of these bad boys and sitting in water with a bunch of seeds, you'll probably attract fungus gnats at some point. There's ways to get around fungus gnats. One way is fungus gnat traps, but an even better way is just a small oscillating fan. And that'll also help keep the top part of your soil dry, which will prevent mold and stuff like that. Not that I don't have mold and stuff like that in my cells, but it's going to happen if they're consistently moist. This talks about misting versus watering and water wicking. I think the latter, again, I wouldn't even recommend overhead misting and watering unless you have no choice. Just because as you get moisture on the plant itself, you can actually create fungal disease on the plant. So the top part of the plant you really want to be dry. The bottom part of the plant, that's where you want the moisture in the root system. Even outside, from a gardening standpoint, we don't even recommend overhead watering from outside, so like a sprinkler system. We actually, if you can do it under soil, like seeper hoses and things like that are much better and much more efficient. So definitely the water wicking is the best way to go. This is a complicated way of doing water wicking, but sort of explains it, I think, in a good manner. I don't know if anybody's ever done that old science trick with a rope and put it in the water and it'll actually suck up the water. The truth is with rope, it's mostly natural materials, so like a hemp rope, for example. And like I said, with those parts of the plants, they're going to naturally wick. So a rope will actually wick water right up it. So you can actually create things like this for potted plants, like an actual wick like that, or you could just water from the bottom and let the soil do the wicking for you. I usually just do enough to just get a little bit of the bottom, and then I monitor it like every other day or so, depending. So when you're first doing it, you'll want to maybe check every day to see how much the levels are dropping. But once you get used to it, you'll be like, okay, I only have to check every 2 days or every 3 days or whatever. I actually grow a lot of tropicals too, and I have these big, instead of these 1020s, if you put like 4 of these together, it's like a big giant tray that's hard like that, and I have that on a shelf, and I keep my tropicals on there. And I water them maybe once or twice a week. So for me, being a very forgetful person and just completely losing track of the world, it's a good way to keep my plants alive. If I didn't do that, they'd all be dead for sure. So you definitely want to start fertilizing once true leaves emerge, and you want your fertilizer to be diluted. So a lot of us, when we think fertilizer, we think like Miracle Grow, which is, I mean, it'll do the trick, but the problem with Miracle Grow is as a non-organic, it has the chance of burning your plants. And you might have seen that on packaging, or somebody say don't over-fertilize, you'll burn. That's because it's water soluble and it allows the plant to take up way more nutrients a lot faster than an organic one. I personally try to go with the organic ones since there's a lot more available now. Unfortunately, they tend to be a little bit pricier. So I mean, do what's within your budget. Just be careful if you're using a non-organic like Miracle Grow, like any of that blue stuff, the blue crystals. You want to dilute that. So do about half of what they recommend, or even a quarter, and then see how that goes, and then go from there. Use fertilizer with phosphorus for root growth. So this is kind of gets a bit dicey and tricky because every plant has different needs, and top growth will equal bottom growth and vice versa. So it's not always straightforward, but phosphorus for the most part, is better for roots. So it helps promote root growth. You'll see this more with, like, say, tomatoes, like where they actually go with a higher phosphorus than nitrogen. Because with nitrogen, you're going to produce a lot of leaves and not a lot of fruit. With phosphorus, you can produce a lot of roots and then a lot of fruit. But the opposite is sort of true with potatoes, where you actually want a lot of top growth, so it sends that energy down into the roots. So things can get mixed up, and every plant is different. But quite frankly, use the balanced fertilizer in the beginning, you'll be fine. At the start of your seedlings, it doesn't really matter what the nutrient conditions are for the grown plant to produce fruit. You're really just trying to get things working to start with. Once you get it out in the garden, then you have to worry about what your balance is and that kind of thing. And I think we put way too much effort into this thing, because I personally do not think about this at all when I'm doing stuff. You know, I usually just chuck some tomato fertilizer in the bed, plant my tomatoes, and see ya, you know, and let them have at it. So I think there's a tendency to overcomplicate things for sure. And think about this, we've been growing crops for thousands of years, you know? We figured it out, and they didn't have like throw-in fertilizer. So I mean, there's plenty of ways to get fertile soil. But I usually use organic fertilizers when I can. I have small spaces, so I have enough to make compost, but not enough to make a lot of compost. Thinning out and potting up. So here's a tricky part when it comes to starting seeds. And this, I think, it totally depends on how you planted things to begin with, how you started things. But going back to seed starting, you might wonder, and I'm talking about the soil blocks and stuff, why not just plant the seeds in the big block, right? It makes sense. Why put them in a little block to put them in a big block? Truth is, they germinate better and develop faster in a small cell than they will in a big cell. So I can get a lot faster germination, better growth, and get them to a point where they'll survive, and then put them into a big cell than I can just putting them straight into a big cell. Because they have to develop the whole root system in this large cell, and they can develop that root system in this small cell very, very quickly. So that's one thing, is smaller actually for germination is better, and then you could scale up from that. And there's different techniques of doing this. Onions, for example, I watched something the other day that was talking about sowing them in a pot and then letting them grow in there, and then take them out and break them up and plant them individually later on, instead of just trying to do them in cells. Because it'll be easier for them to get that growth and then put them out. And it's easy to separate them too. Some plants are easier to separate than others. One thing about this stuff, you let it go too long, the roots will grow together and you'll just get a mat of seedlings, which is fun to deal with. It's okay for tomatoes, because I don't know if anybody's growing tomatoes. You could pretty much take a tomato, stick it in the ground, it's going to grow roots. Even if you cut it in half and stuck it in the ground, it'll probably grow roots. So the tomatoes do fine with this, even if I forget about it. But that wouldn't work for some other stuff that has more sensitive roots. But scaling up is something to keep in mind, and something you will probably have to do before planting out. Something like this, you might be able to get away with growing it in a cell like this before planting it out, and you might be able to go straight to planting out from this. maybe, maybe not. I actually started a few brassicas in one of these, and I had to scale them up already. And I have like 4x4 pots I put them in. I actually probably could just harvest them straight from the pots at this point, but we'll see. It can be tricky, but it's not as tricky as it might seem. One thing you have to be careful of, if you have very small seedlings and you're trying to scale them up, say like from that small soil blocker I was talking about, it's very easy to damage the plant by handling it with your hands and messing around with it. I actually use I used to work in chem labs, so we had a lot of like little equipment for measuring like little delicate things, so I ordered some online and used those. Because they work really well for like dividing seedlings and stuff. And I was like, oh, why don't they sell these in a garden store? So I kind of used something like that. But you could use like, I don't know, like an old butter knife or something like that to kind of noodle things out. But you can also get them into the bigger cells too that way. And one thing I like to use too, especially with maybe like a plug like this, it's just a soil dibber. You take this, you put it in a pot, put it in the ground, and you just kind of go around with it, and it opens up a wide enough hole that you can slip the plug right in. Bob's your uncle, you got it repotted. And also with a lot less handling. So the less you can handle, the better off the plant's going to be. Generally speaking, you want to avoid touching the section where the plant here meets the soil. Like I said, that's the danger zone. That's when you get damping off. It happens right here, right around the juncture of the stem and the roots. And you'll get damping off because the plant will just go boom. But once a plant gets to like this size, it's not as much of a problem, but if you do upset or break that part, your plant's done. I mean, luckily this is a tomato. The guy could just take it and just pop it back in again, but it's not going to work for everything. In this particular case, these were direct sown, which you can actually do that in a 1020 as well. So you could actually just hypothetically take out the thing, just fill that with dirt and sow that way. But again, everything's going to weave together like a mat if you do that. So I don't generally recommend that. This is an example of direct sowing, and he's just thinning out, or she's thinning out. I don't know whose hands those are. But here's another example of thinning as well. A bunch of seeds in one pot. You want to choose some winners and losers. That I have a hard time doing that. I don't like killing stuff. But if you don't do that, you're going to have more problems. Your stuff's going to have stunted growth. So you definitely want to. One thing I do with the flats, I'll use the small one, is you might plant a couple seeds in each compartment, and then you can pick which one's the winner in each individual one. So that's kind of the easiest way to do it without using too much seed. That's one of the reasons too I was talking about pre-germinating tomato seeds. This way I can actually just take the ones that germinate and put them one per piece, and I don't have to thin. So there's a lot of different options for doing that. This is the part I hate the most because it's the trickiest. This is definitely the trickiest part when it comes to getting your seeds ready for the bed. So you're going to get to that transitional point in time where it's time to plant. You got your seeds, they're not dead. Everything's doing well. Let's get them outside. Well, you can't just put them outside because you've had them inside with artificial light. You're going to put them outside, they're going to roast instantaneously. That and the winds are going to desiccate them instantaneously. And I've done this before. And yeah, it's not fun. So this is where it gets a bit tricky. Cold frames are like wondrous things for this because they can actually protect you from that desiccating wind but give you the light. But the other tricky part too is you don't want too much light right away. So you have to get them ready. And that's called hardening off because you're getting them ready to be outside in the real world instead of being little babies on the inside world. And I mean that in the smart way. So you can't put them in direct sun. You want to kind of wean them into that. So lots of times I pick a spot that's like maybe half and half or a third sun and put them in that. And usually they're okay in open air during that period. And they get enough sun that I can eventually build them up and get them into direct sun. There's not really an exact science to it, to be quite honest, because every plant is different. But the trickiest part is you're going to have to monitor it a lot. I have found a couple tricks that I have in my yard because I have like a little pagoda thing in the back where it's shaded over a patio. So I actually put them on the edge of that so that once the sun hits a certain level, it essentially blocks the sun, but it keeps it open, so it works perfectly for me. It's just the right amount of light. And then I actually move them out more and more on the patio into full sun over time. So find something that works for you and go with that. My dad used to have them, he actually was lucky he had some good sunny windows, but he would take them and immediately outside his kitchen door was a patio, so he would take them, put them on the patio against the edge of the house so they were kind of blocked from the wind, kind of blocked from all the light, and then he would eventually move them out more so they got more light. Maybe you have a cold frame if you're lucky. If not, they're not too hard to make. It's one thing I don't have that I wish I had. I could whip one up, but those work phenomenally as well. So it's still the same problem though. If you have it in direct sunlight, you don't want it in direct sunlight right away. You're gonna have to work your way up. So in this particular case, like if this one's in direct sun, you might want to do a shade cloth first and then kind of dial it back from there.
Isn't it to start your seedling in front of a, like I have a really big window and I was actually going to put my...
That's the best bet. I mean, if you have a sunny window, go for it. That nothing replaces the sun. It really doesn't. Is it south facing or?
Southwest.
Oh, so that's perfect. Yeah. So if it's a big window southwest, you're going to get plenty of sun. The one thing with against a window at this time of year is it's a little bit cooler, so you might need that heat mat or something along those lines to keep it a little bit warmer. You know, either jack up your heat if you want to. Not that I want to. I live like a snowman. My kids hate it. I guess that's the end of that part. So, they have some webinar series. I didn't even know they had those. Some previous recordings, I think, of this particular talk as well. And they also have extension events with these links. I don't know where you would find this particular piece shared online, but I'm sure they have it. And again, there's also a lot of other resources for seed starting. And apparently the ticking counter. I did not make this presentation, so the person who did might be involved with this, or it might have been something that they were talking about a lot a year ago or something. We have had some bad tick years recently, and that probably comes with climate change a bit. Yeah. You're probably right. I honestly haven't heard much about it. I would probably change the name though. I'm not sure I'd go with tick encounter. I've encountered ticks and it's never been fun. I've had Lyme disease. That's not fun. Actually, a fun thing about Lyme disease is a lot of people don't know it's actually named after Lyme, Connecticut. So, not too far from here is when they first found it. Whenever I drive through, I yell that to the kids. Yeah, thanks, Dad. Sure.
When we germinate them, does light is important if it's a pink or blue light?
I'm sorry?
Is it important what color is the light? Is it full spectrum or pink or blue?
I don't think it really matters, to be honest. I think they say blue is better, but I use the full spectrum. I'm not messing around. I do have some that are like the three-way switches that you can find. I don't bother with that. That stuff I think is like more important if you're doing like real specific indoor growing for like tropicals and stuff like that. I don't really pay too close attention. I just put the full spectrum on, blast it as much as possible, because as much light as you can get in there, the better off you are.
So that was my question, like how much light per day? Is it like, do you have it on the whole day, or is there a certain?
Well, you don't want to go 24 hours because plants need a light period and a dark period. So that dark period is actually, they do more respiration and other, I don't have my plant physiology book on me, but they do a lot of other important processes in the plant during that period. So you want to get as much as possible, but not 24 hours. So I actually run mine, I shouldn't be doing it that late, but I run it to like 10 o'clock at night. So I wake up in the morning, I go out, and sometimes I wake up late, so it'll be like 11 o'clock before I flip them on. So I try to give them 12 hours tops. The thing is, too, with the lights you're using, if you're using grow lights, they're artificial, so it's not a sun. So again, the more you're going to have to give more light to even come close to trying to do what the sun does. Not that you're going to come close. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on sort of homemade fertilizers like banana peel water, crushed eggshells, oyster shells, that kind of thing?
You know, I think a lot of that is mythological, if not most of it. Eggshells, there has been some, like if you can actually extract essentially the calcium from the eggshells, I think you'd have to like essentially crush them up, dissolve them in vinegar, and you won't want to use straight vinegar on a plant because that'll kill it. You can actually use vinegar as an herbicide. So you can make like tinctures, I think, from eggshells to get calcium, but honestly, you're probably better off just baking up the eggs, cracking them up, and just throwing them in your garden and let nature do its job, if you're going to do that. Banana peels, I've seen some silly hacks on that stuff. I don't believe any of it. It's definitely tried and true methods that will work for you. Cool. Yeah, I think they just note some additional services here. On-site wastewater training, home A system drinking water stuff. Anything you might be concerned with. Water is definitely a big one. I used to test drinking water in this area, which was fun. You learn about how all the factories and stuff like that polluted the soil big time around here. They used to pour toluene straight on the floorboards that all went down the basements. Woo! Yeah, fun stuff. Just about every mill in the area is a hazmat area. All right. Sure. Oh yeah, I have. You can use like a floor oscillating fan, and that's actually good for a few reasons too. Because as the seedlings kind of bend in the wind, they're going to have to naturally strengthen. So again, if you're growing stuff in a mat inside, it's being really babied. It doesn't have to deal with any of the elements. Doesn't have to deal with rain, wind, any of that. So by adding a fan, it actually makes them actually strengthen up and kind of beef up faster. It also prevents them from getting too leggy, which they'll do when they go for light. But yeah, I use that. I actually have a couple small computer fans I like clip on to go into a USB, and those work great. Sure. Oh, absolutely. So the trickier part about cold frames is you almost have to, I think, treat it closer to direct sowing or outdoor sowing versus indoor sowing, just because you're not heating that cold frame, hence cold frame, but you're also getting a lot more warmth sooner. So you probably, my best guess is you probably could go like a week or two earlier than the plant outside. But that's a good question. I don't have a specific answer for that. If you ever run across a local farm or something that I'm sure they do stuff in cold frames, maybe they know. That I don't know. I would think they have something or something like this online somewhere. If not, there are some cool YouTube videos out there. Like I said, just kind of be careful. I try to find somebody who actually like sells gardening products or something like that doing YouTube, or somebody who actually is a farmer. So there's some good ones out there. I think there's one, I think there's a guy who wrote the No-Till Gardening Handbook. He does a whole YouTube series of like no-till gardening and stuff and all the different things he's used. So there's some good sources out there. Just be real careful. Obviously some schlub in the basement or something like that doing stuff, I don't know. But yep, here's information on where to contact us. Go to the page, and again, you can just look it up straight from the page. Find a lot of these materials. I don't know if this is. We're already doing questions. I don't know if this is online or not, but I would think they have something similar to this. Yeah, that's that's a fun one. I mean, if you can get compost, that's great. What do you do for cut flowers, actually? Just out of curiosity. Yeah. Or what are you looking to grow for flowers? Oh, you're doing vegetables. Okay. Sorry, I thought you said flowers. Well, soil rejuvenation. I use organic fertilizers, but I also use a lot of organic materials. So I'm a weird guy. I grow a lot of native stuff. So I have like half my yard kind of like built to be like native habitat, and then the other half I kind of dedicate. Well, a quarter I dedicate to like growing food, and then maybe the other quarter is for the kids to play in. And run around, just like hardscape stuff, like my patio and things like that. But I actually collect my leaves. I shred them up. You can do that with a lawnmower or something, or you could just take the leaves and throw them in a composting bin, and then turn them over the winter. They'll disintegrate pretty quickly. That's a real good soil rejuvenator. That's going to give you a lot of base minerals and elements, but it's not going to put nitrogen back in. So nitrogen comes from like green sources. So your quick compost, like lettuce, grass, old fruit that you mulched up, food scraps like that. Obviously not meat or anything along those lines. You don't want rats. But that'll actually add in a lot more nitrogen. Or you can use organic fertilizers, or for just regular fertilizer as well. We generally recommend like slow release organic ones. The Milorganite is a popular one. It's cheap. They actually, I think they use like old sewage silage and like cow silage for that. And yeah, dehydrate it and boom, throw it on your lawn. Get a cheap bag of that. What's that? Okay. Yeah. Is that the one in Rhode Island? Yeah, that one. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you're dead on with that. Yep. Yeah, I've heard quite a few people talk about them. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's definitely about that time to start thinking about that. I mean, sometimes I do stuff at the end before winter kicks in too. I end up shredding a lot of stuff like old flowers and things like that. I just use my mower, go to town, and then I fill it in, and then I usually put some soil over that, and that's usually good to go. A couple handfuls of organic fertilizer, boom. I do mostly raised beds. I don't think I do anything in ground, but I try to stay as compact as possible with what I do. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, yep. They probably do. I don't know offhand. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. No worries. No worries. Have a good one. Take care. I know they do a lot. I know the people are in it. I just haven't worked with them quite a bit. Take care. No worries. Have a good one. I think there were some seeds in the front. I don't have seeds with me.